How's everyone doing? Okay. Yeah. So tonight we continue with 10 great vows and practices of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. The first two talks is online, and those of you who are not familiar, this is part of a series of talks that's centered on our liturgy book. It's something that we typically recite as a practice. Samantabhadra represents, for those of you who are not familiar, represents the Bodhisattva path, the path of altruistic practice. And you could say these 10 vows and practices encompasses the whole Bodhisattva practice. Okay. So the first one is respect all Buddhas. And as I explained, not only Buddhas of the past, but Buddhas of the present and also future. So from that perspective, all the Dharma practitioners now can be understood as Buddhas of the present, of the future. So revering all the people that you actually meet. Right? And tonight, so this third practice is should be understood in that context. Okay? So the third practice is cultivate the giving of offerings. Now, Buddhism has many different ways of dividing types of offerings. There's kind of twofold offering, 3 types of offering, 4 types, 5 types, 7 types, 8 types, different kind of offering practices. So it plays a central role in our practice. Now, you may wonder, why is there such a strong emphasis in making offerings, cultivating generosity? Anyone? Yeah. You use the mic. It's on.
Because, okay, cool, thanks. I guess it just assists with the practice of kind of letting go of attachments. That's my thing.
Yeah, good. Anyone else want to give it a shot? Why would one want to give up attachments?
Liberation.
Liberation, okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Liz? Hold on a second, the mic is coming.
I guess to remember there is really no self, and not to, try to attract things to self.
Yeah. Good. That's tonight's talk, thank you. There are many, the whole Buddhist path, you could say, evolves around liberation, freedom. And one of the central obstacles to freedom is self-referentiality, attachments. And so the different Buddhist teachings actually tackles this from multiple angles. Sometimes it talks about cultivating detachment. Sometimes it talks about recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings. So if you think about giving and offering. This practice is giving the offering, cultivating the giving of offering. So it has these two aspects. Now, these two are actually two separate Sanskrit words. One is dana, which is giving, but offering is a level more profound than actually giving. It includes a kind of reverence, right? And respect. So you're not just giving to someone equal or having pity on someone. So you're out of sympathy, you're giving to someone who's less fortunate. Offering is actually a form of giving that you engage with out of reverence. Right? And the technical word is puja. Puja. But what's important in different types of giving and offering is it targets a kind of self-referentiality. Right? So it comes at relinquishing self-referential attachment from a positive perspective. If you think about these different bodhisattva practices, one set of practice is called the 6 perfections. The first one is generosity. The others are, cultivating virtue, kind of uprightness, discipline, or diligence, and patience, and different methods of meditation practice and wisdom. All of these first 5 are governed by the 6th one, wisdom. And wisdom here refers to selfless wisdom. But the previous 5 actually comes at it from cultivating particular type of feeling tone. Right? So if you examine the feeling tones of giving and offering, the feeling tone associated with that actually lessens self-referential grasping. So what are some of the feeling tones? Sympathy, gratitude, kindness, compassion, or more commonly, a sense of connection with others. So this means that when we cultivate giving and offering, we have to know the principle of this practice. It is the intent behind this practice that can generate great merit, that can generate the intent or the function of this practice. Right? So there's a very famous story that dates back to the Buddha. At the Buddha's time, he himself was a prince. So when he became a monk, a mendicant, this was a very big deal. India, of course, at that time was not unified. It consisted of different clans, always vying for power, different kingdoms. So when they heard the Shakya clan's only successor, Siddhartha, renounced his kingdom to become a mendicant, this was, a big news. And a lot of eyes were on him. And because of his background, he was able to attract, as a mendicant, kings of different clans, different kingdoms. So he had many of them as his supporter. Right? Bimbasara was one of the great supporters of Shakyamuni Buddha. And his son, Ajatashatru. So there's a great story about Ajatashatru's offering to the Buddha. Now, being a king, I don't know, I'm going to joke. Hopefully no one take offense. Like all politicians, when they do something good, what do they want to do? They want to make sure everyone sees it. It's a part of the PR campaign. So the way he made his offering, inviting the Buddha to give a teaching, is he had lamps, on that day that the Buddha was going to come, he had oil lamps laid out from the forest where Shakyamuni Buddha was, all the way to his kingdom. Right? So, of course, all the town people, everyone in the city was just waiting for the Buddha, kind of a royal welcome. And at that time, many people were moved. One particular old lady, she was actually a beggar. She had no wealth, material objects that's worth anything to give. Because when the king did that, everyone was offering things, adding on to it. It's a kind of common practice. And when you see something virtuous, you add on to it, so you reap the result of the collective benefit of making offering. Is there some practice like this in the West? There's a common practice in South Asia, still done today, when people practice generosity to the monastic practitioners at the end of the rain retreat. A lot of gifts. And those people without gifts, they would make offering and they would touch the gift as if it's kind of like the virtue and the merit is contaminating, right? Kind of spread through everyone. Right? So everyone was offering what they could. Except this beggar. She didn't have anything, but she was so touched and so grateful that she was going to see the Buddha soon. So she only had one possession, her begging bowl. That's the most important thing to her. That's her livelihood. She offered her begging bowl, and somehow she was able to get some oil. She put it in there. And she had a little whisk set up, so she lit the only thing that she had. Everything that she possessed, she put it there. And when the Buddha came, she was completely in this state of reverence. You know. She wasn't thinking about her benefit. She wasn't thinking about what will happen. You make an offering, you can't take it back. Say, after the Buddha's gone, clean the bowl, I can still use it. It was offered. And the bowl is not so good looking. Right? And when the Buddha began his sermon, he spoke about generosity. And he said that this woman who made the offering of her begging bowl to the world honored one, Tathagata, shall one day become a Buddha. And the luminosity from her lamp shall shine throughout eternity, far exceed Ajatasattu's offering of all the lamps. Ajatasattu was the king. He's the one who invited the Buddha. He was like, After the Buddha gave a sermon, he left, and everyone was there to clean up, and the king's guards. And by the next morning, they left everything, let the lamp continue to burn. By the next morning, of course, all the lamps went out, right? The oil, except that woman's lamp. It continued to shine. In other words, the oil, the little bit of oil that she got, were inexhaustible. And one of the Buddha's disciples, who was supposedly supernatural power number one, Modgayayana, Mujinlian, saw this rare phenomena, and then was wondering, how is this possible? So he used his supernatural power to see the source of this lamp, the light. And as soon as he opened his clairvoyance, the eye of clairvoyance, he saw that the lamp and the light actually shone throughout the heavens. Right? And being ecstatic, he asked the Buddha about this. And the Buddha said, it's because of the generosity. Right? So from the story, we see that it's not the actual amount that matters. Right? It's the what. What matters? Is it the object? No. Intention. Yeah. The motivation. So with the right intention in the practice of generosity, it will reap the corresponding result. Now, in the context of this teaching, to cultivate the giving of offerings, it's talking about making offerings to the Buddha. But you may think that, well, the Buddha has passed away already. 2,500 years ago. Where are the Buddha? Where are the Buddhas? Right? So then you have to watch the first video that talked. The Buddha refers to all sentient beings, right? All practitioners as future Buddhas. So this is quite difficult, right? The practice of offering to all sentient beings, like the person next to you, as the Buddha. It's very difficult. Practicing generosity, giving, that could be easy. Right? We see someone less fortunate. Oh, it's very easy to give. So what is the feeling tone behind that kind of giving? Pity? maybe? You see? Maybe kindness is possible, or compassion. And the way we give, what we give also matters. There are many stories of the past lives of the Buddha. It's called Jataka tales of the Buddha as a bodhisattva in the process of perfecting generosity. Some of the things that he gave was extraordinary, inconceivable. At one time, he was a king. And Indra, a kind of indigenous divinity in the Hindu or the larger Brahmanical Vedic pantheon, knew that this king was practicing generosity and wanted to test this king. So he goes to the king, manifesting as a Brahmin, asking for him to give up his kingdom, which he did. And he took his wife and children and went in the woods, live a normal life, and the Brahmin appeared again. And says, I have this great need. I'm getting old and I really need servants. May I have your children? The Bodhisattva gave away his children. And then this is extraordinary, inconceivable, and he asked for his wife. He gave away his wife. You know? So these Jataka stories always have a good ending. So eventually Indra manifested himself as a god and gave back everything, his kingdom, his wife, his children. But there are other stories, Jataka tales, in which the Buddha was in one lifetime was a prince who also cultivated generosity. And one time he was out in the woods, his entourage. He saw this tigress, completely emaciated, skin over bone. But the tigress has cubs. She has nothing to give to the cubs, no milk, nothing to give to the cubs. And he wanted to help this tiger because it's not only one life, it's got multiple lives. So he figured out a way for him to sacrifice himself right in front of the tigress. So the tigress is able to give, bite, take his food, take his body, eat it, to have as sustenance, and then be able to feed also her cubs. So he climbed up on the top of a cliff. Below is the tigress. Jumped off right in front of the tigress. So you have these extraordinary, inconceivable stories of what it takes to perfect the practice of generosity. So the bar is pretty high, right? So from these stories, we can see that it's not only the motivation, the intent that matters. It's also how one gives, what one gives, what one's willing to give up. You know? One time I saw a video about this person talking about some of the crazy things that he saw. And he was talking about this gentleman having this $150,000 Mercedes. I don't know what model, the kind of Mercedes he's talking about. I think it's the type that looks like a box, like a Jeep kind of thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's like a SUV type. It's not the fancy, smooth ergonomics. Those are cheaper, you know. Yeah. Yeah. What is it? G-Wagon. Maybe it's a G-Wagon. So he parks this car, and he gives the usher in front of a restaurant like $5 to park the car. And he was talking about, that's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, you give a $150,000 car to, what is that person called? A valet. And you go in the building, he's going to have a lot of fun with that $150K car. So it's like a car that's really valuable, you know. What kind of mindset is that? So you had that much money to buy a car. And the tip that you give doesn't really correlate with what you can give, you know. So now asking all of us to practice giving, even though the bar seems high, and the object of our giving, offering, seems like it's no longer around, the Buddha. But actually, it's something that, if you understand the Buddhist principle, what's behind this practice, it's actually selfless wisdom. Right? The ability to cultivate selfless wisdom. And at the same time, cultivate compassion. Right? This is quite a unique bodhisattva practice. Because simultaneously, the practice of offering simultaneously cultivate two aspects, two principles within Buddha Dharma: wisdom and compassion. Now, in order, from the Buddhist doctrinal perspective, in order for a person to realize no self, to experience awakening, you just need to abandon greed, hatred, ignorance, the obstacles to self-grasping. You know. So it's technically not necessary to cultivate compassion. Right? And here lies the distinction between a liberated person, which is called an arhat, versus a Buddha who has perfected all the bodhisattva practices. Both are liberated, but the sutra describes the profundity of wisdom and compassion is comparable to like an elephant versus like a rabbit. Both can cross the river from this shore to the other shore, but the rabbit has no idea the depth of the river, the stream. It just floats on top over. Whereas the elephant knows every nook and cranny and the bottom of this river. All the depth of practice. It's able to, with each step, press down on the bottom of the river. Goes all the way through. And is able to carry all other creatures, across to the other shore. So, in Buddha Dharma, there are practices that targets the generation of wisdom. Right? Meditating, contemplating the nature of mind, right? Or contemplating impermanence, contemplating dependent origination, the interconnectedness of all things. None of them actually involves necessarily the practice of compassion, generosity. See? And you see this in early text. Some of the close disciples of the Buddha, every one of them have different personalities. Some of them doesn't seem to have that much merit. They are liberated. They have wisdom that transcend the three poisons. But when they go alms begging, no one really gives them food. Or they end up, the food is gone. See? Whereas some arhats, people are rushing to make offering to them. They have an overabundance of food. Right? That is called merit. Where does merit come from? In Buddha Dharma, merit comes from the connections that one develops and cultivates with sentient beings, with living beings. Right? Always there, always present to support others. So when that person needs support, sentient beings just flock. People just flock to help. Right? Now, two people may have the same wisdom of liberation, but one can live in poverty. Another one, abundance. Why is that? Merit. Merit alone cannot bring about liberation. Right? Wisdom can. But merit is able to allow practitioners to amplify, utilize, and redirect resources to the benefit of and make connections with all living beings, right? And thereby generating more merit, not in a self-referential way. Right? Generate merit to practice compassion, to generate more merit. It's like investment, you can say. And that merit, because in that process of practicing merit, is connected with sentient beings, developing good relation with sentient beings. Therefore, compassion is simultaneously practiced. So wisdom and compassion being the two key principles within Buddha Dharma, simultaneously practiced in the practice of offering. the relinquishing of self-referential attachment, and yet at the same time benefiting others. Right? So, generosity and offering practice are extremely important. Extremely important. Particularly for the Bodhisattva path. Because the end result of Bodhisattva path is not self-liberation. It's actually Buddhahood, the liberation of all beings. So, because the aim, the direction is different, therefore, the scenery on that path will look different. And the practices that's engaged with along that path is different. So the result is different. When the cause is one way, the result will correspond to the cause. So, Samantabhadra, being the embodiment of the Bodhisattva practice, the Bodhisattva path, this third practice of cultivating the giving of offering. So in this practice, we cultivate the right intent. We don't do it just because it's a nice thing to do, or the scriptures tell us to do. The key is to generate the feeling tone, the corresponding feeling tone. And what enables us to generate this feeling tone of kindness, sympathy, compassion, the opposite of stinginess, right, is our observation and reflection on the connections that we have with all beings. All beings. Because our whole culture, our whole society, maybe even families, are all in on rearing us to think for ourselves, to benefit ourselves. Right? So it's very difficult to break free from our own habit tendency and everything we observe in our whole environment is just based on self-centeredness. Right? The whole culture is in on it. So it's very hard to go against the stream, if you will. So it takes cultivation. It takes proactive reflection and observation of all the things that and the nourishment that we have received from our bodies, our views, our thoughts, our possessions, our jobs, our careers, our opportunities. Where do they actually come from? The food that we eat? Right? What's involved in allowing us to experience these things? Right? Other people. Every single thing we have, possess, experience, everything we can think of, our thinking process, our education, our intelligence, our skill set, everything comes from the benefit of others. Everything. Everything. That's why I say, that offering, it's a little different than giving. Right? The practice of giving to someone inferior, someone equal, someone in need, whereas offering, you're actually cultivating gratitude. When you recognize that you belong to other beings, you exist because of other beings. Your livelihood, everything about you, depends on the benefit of others, the flourishing of others. Then there's humility. So the practice of offering cultivates humility and gratitude alongside other qualities that giving generates. Kindness, sympathy, maybe pity. It has all the benefit of the practice of giving and more. So very, very seldom do we practice offering. Now, we're not going to put the bar so high that's not practicable. That would defeat the whole purpose of Buddhist practice. So we begin where we are. And each and every one of you can practice offering. Can practice offering. What can you offer? Words. You can offer words. You can offer your thoughts, your good wishes. You can offer things, of course. You can offer money and objects. But you can offer a lot of things. You can offer your skill. For example, we may not be able to know how to put up a cabinet. Maybe you do. You can help build a cabinet or a desk or something. We may not know how to operate installing a program in a computer. Maybe you do. But you do it with the intent of gratitude. Gratitude. The practice of offering. With that sense of humility. Now, I want to say a little bit about the object of offering. The object of offering. Of course, all living beings, people around us, but there's still a difference. There's still a difference. One person versus something that will last in perpetuity. In perpetuity. For example, and this has to do with karma. Right? This has to do with karma. Karma technically means intention, but practically it refers to the process of cause and effect. the cause leading to a fruition, that process. Now, if you use material gifts will always run out, right? But if you use material gift to create opportunities that will actually grow and flourish, or can generate practice, can generate compassion, can affect more people, then that's the kind of object of offering that has a lasting effect. For example, you contribute to the building of a hospital, right? As opposed to, I don't know, something else. Right? Now that hospital is going to produce job opportunities for a lot of people. And that hospital is built to benefit other people. Right? So it's like your karmic investment continue to amplify, multiply. Does that make sense? So the object of our offering makes a difference. Traditionally, in Buddha Dharma, we recognize several things as fields of merit. Fields, like crops, like rice fields. Right? Why does it use that analogy? Because it can harvest more year after year after year after year. You're planting the seeds, and it will blossom, and it will continue again and again and again and again. Right? What objects are fields of merit? Hospitals, it's actually one of them. Of course, back then, it's not called hospital. It's called places that support and help the sick. The sick. So in Buddhist history, based on archaeological evidence, Buddhist monasteries, thousands of years ago, were the first ones as a spiritual, religious organization to actually build hospice programs. Did you know that? Buddhist monastery, from the archaeological evidence of Central Asia and India, and matching with the Vinaya text, textual and archaeological evidence. Why? Because the Buddha said that helping the sick, it's actually a field of merit. So in our term, hospitals. Right? Second, perhaps more important, because hospitals, the sick, exist in the material realm. It's able to help people, but it's not able to help people reach liberation. It's able to help people become healthy. Right? The only thing that's able to help people to liberate from suffering and the causes of suffering is actually the three jewels. The Dharma, supporting the Dharma, the community that practices the Dharma. So you're supporting the facilities that support practitioners. And each of these practitioners will go home to their own lives and benefit more people, have contact with their own karmic affinity with other sentient beings in perpetuity. Right? So the Dharma, Sangha communities, and of course, the Buddha. Right? So in this context of Samantabhadra, his vow and practice was to make offerings, widely cultivate offering to Buddhas of the past, present, and future. So that means Dharma practitioners, sentient beings as Buddhas. Right? We can't go back in time to make offering to Shakyamuni Buddha anymore. But Shakyamuni Buddha, because of his vow or practice, he's still continuing to save sentient beings. Like the scriptures that we have, the teachings, the corpus of teachings, in a sense, and he has said in the scriptures that wherever my teachings are, that's where I am. So actually, Shakyamuni Buddha is still saving all beings now. You see? So, supporting the three jewels so that people can encounter this teaching, derive benefit, engage in practice, that ultimate object of offering. So for this reason, in Asian countries, there's a wide spread practice of engaging in printing of scriptures, Buddhist text, and publication. And in 10th century, this world's first printed book. Do you know what that was? This world, this earth, first printed book, the Diamond Sutra, with block printing. It was invented in China. So Buddhist practitioners have throughout the centuries invested a lot of their practice at the apex of technology. Historically. To do what? Spread the three jewels. And the reason for that is the practice of offering. So more people will have access to the teachings. Even one line of the text explaining about freedom, about the cause of suffering, allowing people to realize and be free from the clench of vexations. That's great, great merit. Great, great merit. So, tonight I've spoken about several things. Originally I had a lot of things prepared, but I'm not going to look at it. A lot of technical things, 2 types of offerings, and 3 types, 4 types. There's of course material offering, spiritual offering, and that offering of liberation. You know, it's most important because that allow people to realize awakening, so that they're freed from suffering and they're freed from fear. You know, free from fear. I spoke about the object of offering, the different types of fields of merit. You know, the sick, helping the sick, offering to the Buddha, Buddhas, right? And the teachings, printing books, supporting facilities and institutions that teaches the Dharma, and the community that teaches Dharma. And you yourself can also share the Dharma. You can use the Dharma to share with other people through your words, through the energy of your mind, right? Good wishes, meditating on. Also, I spoke about the intention of the kind of feeling tone that must be cultivated in order to have the full effect of the practice of offering. Right? Do you remember some of the feeling tones? What's the most important feeling tone? Reverence, humility. That's it? Compassion, kindness, gratitude. I also spoke about, because we're kind of going against the stream living in this world, materialistic world. So it's important to cultivate by observing and reflecting on ourselves. All that we possess, everything that we are, actually come from the benefit of everyone around. In the present, also come from our predecessors in the past. And the things that we do, the practices that we engage in, will affect people of posterity. So, because we live in an interconnected world, irrespective of the way this culture has reared us into believing individuality, right? Individualism, autonomy, despite that, we're all deeply, deeply connected. So to often reflect on that, that will allow us to generate this gratitude, so that when we practice offering, we actually do it out of gratitude, not because we pity, or sympathize or empathize with people in need, but we actually revere all beings. So it's a short summary of some of what I said. So I can entertain some questions if you have. I want to add one note. Because it's difficult for us to generate reverence for different types of people. Therefore, it requires us to kind of set aside certain time every day to actually reflect on this, the interconnectedness of all beings. Even those people who are harmful, adverse, present adversities. Right? Because they present adversities, they draw out our resourcefulness, how to solve problems, right? How to help others, how to be inspired to practice compassion. So we can't only see one side of things. Right? The ramifications of the difficult people and struggles that we experience. If we only see it from a self-referential perspective, this is harming me, this is not good for my idea, or that ideology doesn't gel with my ideology. We have to step outside of the self-referential view and allow our thoughts to be more porous, so we see multiple perspectives of the ramifications, the impact. And we actively engage with the world, all those around us, because in seeing harm, it generates kindness, generates compassion. It doesn't say harm doesn't need to be contained, transformed. They do. But because of that, it generates kindness, the wish to help others. So on that basis, we have to actually still be grateful, even though it's very difficult. To generate gratitude. But if we step outside of the self-referential view, and if we look at the development of human civilization from a long temporal perspective and a very broad angle, we actually see that in history, what's actually perceived as harm at that time, the results may not necessarily be always harmful. Right? A century later, several generations later, it leads to new inventions. The struggles and difficulty leads to innovation, leads to opportunity. Right? So if we didn't have those difficulties, it's very difficult. Right? That's why from the perspective of the Bodhisattva path, the Buddha was very grateful to all those people that harmed him. Right? Because of them, he was able to generate patience. He was able to perfect that practice. Yeah. But it's very difficult for us to step outside of our self-referential, individualistic perspective. So that's why it's very important to reflect on this. Even within our own lives, the difficulties that we experienced and how these experiences led to good stuff. Led us to practice meditation. When we first began practice, we just wanted to get our own benefit. I'm here because I just want to find ways to relieve stress reduction. But as a person practices, they see the benefit, they themselves experience benefit, then they want to help other people. Does that make sense? So things are always more complicated. So we start with our own lives, the difficulties, and how that has inspired us to do better, to be better. Very few people actually come to the center. They want to practice meditation they want to practice Dharma because I want to benefit all beings. How many of you start practicing because you want to benefit all beings? Right? Very few. Right? I remember Phil when you came. Right? Practice stress reduction and meditation. Now, because of him, we went to the Tallahassee dispatcher, part of the police system, to teach meditation. You know? So we may start out a certain way, right? But the more we practice Dharma and we see the benefit, we want to spread it to others. And also, starting with ourselves, if we reflect on others, you see other people this certain way, at this particular time, in this space, this person acts a certain way. Right? If you reflect on yourself enough, you will see that you used to be this way. Maybe not exactly, but in another space and time and expression. Right? So you have forgiveness. You see? And we ourselves act that way. And then later on, we encounter the Dharma, we share the practice with others, we change. Same thing with those people. It's able to change. Everything's impermanent. In other words, everything has new beginnings. Can have new beginnings. So, the practice of offering. We start with people that maybe we respect, worthy projects that supports the flourishing of the three jewels. So more people will be able to experience benefit. And then move on to something that's more difficult for us. And then we engage in that practice. Okay, so little by little. If we don't have any material wealth, we have our words, we have our teachings, we have our practice, we have our mind. Right? And you have your skill, you have your time. You see? Just make sure the intention is that of, ideally, gratitude, humility, that come out of recognition of interconnectedness of all beings. So essentially, we're giving back that which we have received, the nourishment, the benefit we have received. We're only giving back. And with respect, with gratitude. You know? So, okay, sorry. Questions? Yeah, you had a question? Please.
Thank you so much. I remain a little confused about the notion of merit and whether it, as an aspect of intention, either fuels or dispels being self-referential. And I say that because as a child, I would work to get a merit badge. And a merit badge would bring me some recognition or honor.
Sure.
So can you say a bit more about where merit fits in that spectrum of intention in a way that doesn't come back to entrap us in doing something because we'll feel good?
Yeah. Merit works the same way as generosity and giving. It's just another expression or framework aimed to dismantle self-referentiality. Right? But merit is more closely aligned with not only the wisdom of selflessness, dismantling self-attachment, it's aligned with all sentient beings. You can't generate merit without sentient beings, without other people. Right? So that ties in with the cultivation of compassion too. So giving, the practice of generosity, the practice of giving, the practice of offering, the practice of merit, they all have this quality, this dual aspect of dismantling self-referentiality and amplifying compassion. So that's the correct intent. That's the feeling tone. That's the target. But as we all know, people do all kinds of what appears to be meritorious things for all kinds of reasons. Right? Like Ajatasattu, the king, making offering to the Buddha so he can give a sermon. It's a very elaborate display of his wealth. It's kind of a mixed karma there. So it goes back to him, like you were talking about the merit badge. So he looks very good. I'm the one who provide this occasion. That's why the Buddha says, actually, your merit in comparison with that beggar is so much lower. Right? She gave everything without the intent of reciprocity. It's just offering. It was her livelihood, her bowl. So merit making with the mind of reciprocity, what do I get in return, greatly limits the actual amount of merit because it goes right against the original intent of the practice. Right? So instead of benefiting all beings, you're just limited to benefiting yourself. Right? So if you benefit yourself, then it's just an exchange program that you're doing. Right? I do something for you, scratch your back, and then you can scratch my back. So it's reduced to just simply karmic act, individual karmic act. See? So, it works like that with merit. It's the same with generosity, giving. It's the same with offering. On the surface, it may look like great offering, but if that practice is tainted with self-referentiality, then it's just the consequence of that practice does not amplify. Right? Even if the object of offering as a field of merit is intended to amplify through generations to come for posterity. If you practice based on self-referential intention, then it's greatly reduced to only your one good act. So it doesn't actually generate countless flourishing of continuous, endless benefit to all beings. Right? So, does that help? Yeah. I mean, a simple act, reversely, if we only have our speech, if we only have our intention, if we only have a certain skill, like carpentry, but your carpentry, you're not building that table for your own little family to get paid for your own company You're actually building a table as an altar for a Buddha statue. So everyone who comes here to do prostrations, to make wishes, to make vows, to generate compassion when they see this Buddha image, you actually have a percentage of everyone in perpetuity, their karmic act. That's how it flourishes. So traditionally, why the Buddhists print scriptures, print Buddhist texts, so that it actually, the karmic act actually is designed to continue without end, benefit all beings throughout perpetuity. Right? So if one even without skill of carpentry, only have words, or only have your hand and copy a phrase of the text, and if to give to other people, that could benefit a lot of people. Does that make sense? So we can all practice generosity. We can all practice, ideally, offering, the practice of offering. So the intent limits or expands the consequence, meritorious or limited to just karma. Right, so it's very important. Okay. Other questions? Does people have questions online? Gita, did you? Okay.
You've told us the story about Buddha Dharma going to meet the emperor in China.
Yes.
And the emperor recounts all these wonderful things he's done to promote the Dharma. And he asks, how much merit do I have from all this? And Bodhidharma says, no merit.
No merit.
Yes. And I think the explanation, part of the explanation was that the things the emperor had done, they lead to blessings, but they didn't qualify for merit. Can you speak to that distinction?
Yeah. It's basically the same. Blessings and merit, the same. Just different translations. Because he did it like all kings. They just want to display their wealth and benefit. All politicians, maybe. It greatly reduces to his own kind of self-referential intent. He did it with the mind seeking reciprocity. What am I going to get out of it? So Bodhidharma says, no merit. You know, that no merit refers to genuine merit, right? Because that field of merit, building monasteries, printing sutras, they're supposed to be the field of merit that can cultivate and harvest endlessly. But now he's just thinking in terms of himself. Right? So there's no merit for that kind of merit, none. You're not getting any of that. You see, so our intention, very important. Me?
Thank you, Guo Gu. I guess I want to just ask you to stretch that a little more, if I could, about just to get for me, to get an even better understanding of, how the intention and the object in the situation, the context matter when it comes to generosity. I'm thinking out loud. So let's say that, let's sort of go back to the story about the Buddha, the beggar woman, the bowl, and the king. The way that that story goes is that the king's magnificent display was very self-referential. He did that, either to impress people around him or to impress the Buddha. Really it was really wasn't about helping other people. It wasn't really generosity. Let's say the story is a little different. Imagine a slightly different way. Let's say that the king invited some king from a neighboring state, and this king from a neighboring state had the idea of making war upon this kingdom and creating war. Yeah, upon this kingdom and creating lots of suffering. And the king decided, if I have this big display of how powerful we are, maybe I can get that king not to do it. Does that?
I don't know if that will work, but
it may not have been the most skillful means to do that. There may have been other.
the other king may say, "Wow, he's wasteful." Attack!
He's got a lot of money. But yeah, I guess what I mean to say is, maybe this is a bad example, but I guess what I mean to ask in kind of the abstract is, can something that seems to not be generous in one context, if your intention is actually to benefit all sentient beings, if the object if it doesn't appear to be generous, can that also bring merit? I think that was pretty unclear, but does that make any sense?
I hear what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
It's an abstract question,
Fair.
theoretical. If an act does not appear to be meritorious,
Mm-hmm.
can it still generate merit?
Yes.
Yeah. It depends on the intention. We gotta go back of the actor.
Mm-hmm.
And the supporting conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So all those needs to be considered, theoretically speaking, for the result. Right? Also, the actor is the agent in this. So just to give you a context,
Sure.
Ajatashatru, he assassinated his father. Okay, I didn't give you this context, but so here's a king who assassinated his father to usurp his father's own throne. Now he's the king. Complicated. And he's venerating the Buddha to show to his people, yeah, I'm just as good as Bimbasara, my father. Look. This is the mendicant that my father supported. Yeah. I'm doing that too, see? Very complicated, right? So all of these conditions lead to what the Buddha said. Right? So a theoretical question in the abstract, we can't really deduce from that. Like a principle, yes, it does. It can appear like not meritorious, but actually, there's so many different factors, right? For example, if the agent is selfless, it's actually an arhat. Right? And does something that doesn't seem too kind or meritorious. Does it generate merit? Still, The agent is liberated, but it still depends on other conditions there and the reception of that. You know? If the result leads to the other party or the circumstance to generate great benefit to all beings, that's different than if it doesn't really work. You know, there was an arhat that used to yell at people. He doesn't have anger anymore, but it's just had this habit tendency of just scolding. You know. So sometimes the people that he scold doesn't feel too good. So they tattletale on him to go to the Buddha. Your students yelled at me the other day. Why is he doing that? Can you tell him to just calm down? You know? So it's like all these different conditions. You know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how helpful that it was, but
No, that was very helpful.
So
yeah.
the act, the intent, the agent, the object of the action, and all the supporting conditions, the circumstance, those people witnessed this, you know, all those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all those are kind of at play in the repercussion of an action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why I say just preemptively, in case we offend people. That doesn't mean we don't offend people. Even teachers, all kinds of great practitioners, they still offend people. That's why I always say preemptively, just repent all the time. You know, just repent for the possibility of harm all the time. Even when you do some good, you repent. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. The teachings say that there is no self and that separation is like a delusion, right?
From an ultimate perspective, conventional perspective, of course there's a self. You know? Like Kori is made up of non-Kori, but Kori has a particular history. Why Kori became Kori. You know, family, friends, experiences.
Right.
So form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
Okay.
Intertwined.
Could you help me understand that in terms of the acknowledgement of all sentient beings? If we're acknowledging that there are others for the purpose of doing beneficial action,
Yeah.
how do we also recognize who is it that does those actions?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So this is a question about the relationship between conventional reality and ultimate reality. Ultimately, the teaching of no self doesn't mean nothingness, absence. It doesn't mean there's no one there, actually. It just means that all things are in flux. They continue to change. And they're connected with everything else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So connected with everything else. Like the very reason why we are the way we are is because of everything else. All the people in our lives, all the interactions that we've had. So everything is there. Everything is there. Everyone is there. All sentient beings are there. And each have their own history of how they became the way they are. So karma can be understood as simply history. Like nothing happened out of the blue. There's a history to why the momentum of cause and effect have shaped them into a particular things. So everything's there. But simultaneously, they continue to change. So there's infinite possibilities. There's no fixed thing. That thing is made up of everything else. So it's just connectedness. The main takeaway is intention, gratitude, try to make offerings as opposed to just giving, be exposed to what is present. Right? What's present when we engage in offering practice? And the object of our offering. Yeah. We try to engage in this practice wisely.